Okay, so we're going to get started. I'm actually going to introduce Michael Pond. Thank you very much for joining us today. I looked forward to all our pre-discussions leading up to this with both of you. Michael Pond is a psychotherapist with 40 years of experience specializing in mental health and addictions. He offers individual, family, and group therapy. In 2 decades of private practice in BC and the interior, Michael developed a diverse client base, especially with the First Nations communities, the children, the families, and the agencies to schools and to court-related psychiatric services. He lost his family and home and practice to alcoholism. He was homeless. He lived in the downtown, in and out of recovery houses, and went to prison. So we're dealing with somebody who has lots of experience, lots of personal knowledge, has supported many people, taken them by the hand and brought them with him, and I appreciate that about you. It's just so nice to meet you, Mike.
Thank
and
you.
Welcome to the UBC Learning Circle. And Gerald is the co-facilitator presenter for today. Gerald is from the Lytton Indian Band, located in, I'm going to say the Nicola Valley. I can never, I'm sorry. Nakatma.
My territory.
And in the room, we're also joined by my supervisor, the beautiful Leah Walker. And we have 2 others in the room today that are, we have a live audience as well today. So back to Gerald. For the past 6 years, he has been working at Correction Service Canada as an Aboriginal Correction Program Officer. He is currently on assignment to the Metro Vancouver East, New Westminster Community Parole, where he facilitates culturally appropriate correctional treatment programs to the Aboriginal, Inuit, and Métis offenders who are currently under the jurisdiction of Correction Service Canada. Aboriginal programs are designed in a culturally sensitive way to challenge the negative behaviors that increase the Aboriginal offender's risk to reoffend. Many of the Aboriginal offenders he has worked with have attended an Indian residential school or have been impacted by the intergenerational impacts of the residential school. So I'm really excited today because it's a really big group. So if you have a question, just a little bit of housekeeping, if you could raise your hand, and then I'll get the attention of the presenters and we will relay the question, or you'll be able to ask the question. On webinar, if you have a question, please type it in and I will actually relay the question to Mike or to Gerald. So I'm going to actually turn the table over to Mike. Somebody still has their mic on. Stephen, can you help us out and help them maybe mute their microphone? Thank you. So Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Crystal, and thank you everybody for inviting me to do this talk. And it's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to, and actually quite exciting to see so many people and faces out there. Cowichan Valley, my oldest son played for the Cowichan Valley Capitals junior A hockey team many years ago.
It's actually Cowichan that has their mic on. Cowichan, you still have your mic on. That's why you're up in the center. Hokumenum?
Cowichan, you have your mic on.
So it's actually muted. We just turned it on now.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you.
Are we still okay to go?
Yeah,
Stephen,
Right.
can we turn the mute on? Because I don't know. There's so many rooms.
It's Adams Lake.
Adams Lake, could you please turn off your mic? Adams Lake, please turn off your mic. Thank you. Stephen, can we force mute that one, please? I can't see anybody in the room yet. It's off. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. Sorry, Mike.
Okay, you ready to go?
Sorry, yeah.
Do I have to do a full rewind and repeat? Or,
No, just go.
No.
Just go. All right.
Go.
Again, it's an honor to be here. Today, I'm going to be talking about trauma, in particular the residential school trauma. I worked with First Nations now for 35 years, and when Crystal introduced me and said I've been at this for 40 years, that makes me pretty old. I'm 60 years old, so yeah, I started this work as a baby almost. Hello?
Oh, just checking our mute, if we're mute or not mute. Okay. I'm going to put you on mute now. I'm going to put you in mute and just read your lips.
Read my lips.
We're not in the conference. We're just sort of outside the room. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. So I'm going to be talking about trauma, and in particular the Indian residential school trauma. I've been working with First Nations for a long time, 35 years, and I've heard many, many stories about the Indian residential schools. And it's just an honor to be able to kind of address that and have so many people interested in maybe some new ideas or some new knowledge about how to help and how to heal and how to treat. So I'm going to begin today by helping us understand what trauma is with respect to the Indian residential school and the history of First Nations. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to tie it in and blend it in with one or two of my own case studies and clients that I'm currently seeing. I'm going to specifically talk about how it affects our brain, how it affects the mind, and how it affects relationships. And I'm going to crib from a model that was designed by Dr. Dan Siegel, who's quite a well-known neuroscientist, psychiatrist, pediatrician, and he developed a model called the Triangle of Wellbeing. And I'm going to just give you a little drawing of what that Triangle of Wellbeing looks like, if you're not familiar with it. So first we have, of course, the triangle. The top of the triangle is the brain. Down here we're going to have the mind. And over here we're going to have relationship. Okay, I hope you people can read upside down and sideways, because that's how I apparently put it up there. I'm going to demonstrate how this was basically disrupted, ruptured, and destroyed by the Indian residential school and the intergenerational.
Oh, you got it.
Still there, everybody?
No.
Somebody's unmuted their microphone again. Adam's Lake, could you please mute your microphone? Thank you. Sorry.
All right. I'm learning too. And specifically because of my work, I'm a psychotherapist / counselor / guidance guy, or whatever you want to call me, but I frame the work that I do as psychotherapy. And so we're going to look at how the narrative and the storytelling, how that impacts this triangle. How storytelling, how me telling my story actually can alter the structure of the brain. It can change how my mind processes thoughts and emotions. And the key piece through this is how good, balanced, healthy, positive relationships impact on this triangle. For instance, when I went to Haida Gwaii, the last trip, I just got back last week, I walked into the meeting room much like this, and there was nobody there yet. I got there kind of early, and I looked over, and on the flip chart it said, cutting deer meat or Michael Pond. I got a little nervous, because I'd read up a bit about the Haida Gwaii people, and they were pretty scary warriors back in the day. But what they'd been doing the day before was deciding what they were going to do in the workshop, or they were going to do a cutting deer meat cultural kind of thing, or listen to me talk. So it's interesting how the brain works. I walked in there and I saw cutting deer meat or Michael Pond, and I got a little nervous. So first of all, let's see if we can determine what is trauma. I know probably a lot of you have already been to a lot of workshops or trainings on trauma. But when we look at the residential school experience, we're talking about a very unique type of trauma. It's, typically when we think of trauma, we think of the war veterans, Vietnam War veterans, or 9/11. So these kind of terrorist events that we tend to link trauma to. But the residential school experience is very different because it's been going on for many years, hundreds of years. Well, the residential school itself for just over 100 years, but colonialism and marginalization has been going on a long time. So I'm also going to talk a lot about the intergenerational and the cross-generational effect. And I see it every day in my work. So in 1491, that's a pretty significant date in history. It's the year before 1492. Pre-contact. In that time frame, what I've learned in working with First Nations over the many years that I have, primarily in the Okanagan and the Shuswap areas, I was 20 years up there working with those people. I have many friends and people that I call my brothers and sisters from that area. The childhood in those years, pre-contact, the children had long, playful, wonderful childhoods. You were still a child until you reached puberty, 11, 12, 13 years of age. Europeans showed up and you got to be a child till about age 7, I think. And by then, they were dressing the children as adults, and they were being treated as adults. In the community, there's a phenomenon going on that was called allo-parenting. The whole community parented the children. The children are always being watched and taken care of. So within 50 years of the Europeans arriving, smallpox, measles, tuberculosis, it's estimated that 90% of First Nations people in North America were gone. They were killed by disease. And for the next 4 centuries, the First Nations were hunted, murdered, starved into submission, and put on reserves, usually the worst land. And then Sir John A. Macdonald, Prime Minister at the time in 1876, said that it was time to kill the Indian in the child. So by 1930, 75% of First Nations were enrolled in Indian residential schools across the country. Most of them in Western Canada, BC, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the western parts of Northern Ontario. There's schools all over the country, but they were mainly conglomerated in that area. By 1996, the last residential school was closed. That's a long time. I think that works out to, 120 years? And there's been 150,000 of our First Nations people that went through residential school. It's interesting, when I started this work with First Nations 35 years ago, I didn't hear much about the residential school. It was kept very secret. And so it's been an amazing thing for me to watch, in probably the last 10 years in particularly, how our First Nations people are coming forth and openly and honestly and courageously talking about the residential school experience. It really is an embarrassment to our country. So we all probably know what this type of trauma that was being inflicted in the residential schools. 80% reported sexual abuse.
Can you get you just to talk up? Speak up just a little bit.
Speak up a bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Do I have to yell?
It's the Adobe.
People having trouble hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, I will speak up.
Thank you. Sorry.
80% reported sexual abuse. And in my opinion, that's underestimated. In my work experience, I think most of these figures are unestimated. That's just my opinion. It's something that is typically underreported, particularly for males. They weren't allowed to use their language. They weren't allowed to follow their traditions. This is a culture that is based on oral history. We know for sure 12,000 at least years. An oral history, not a written language. The irony is that took away the mechanism for healing. Healing comes from interaction, human face-to-face interaction. And First Nations culture was grounded in that. Routinely starved, routinely beaten, and of course in the last week we've heard about the electric chair at St. Anne's, in Fort Albany, James Bay. So generation after generation, people who became adults in the system did not know or learn how to be parents. How could they? Because when they were taken away, they never saw, they never were able to watch and have that modeled for them. So, what has been the result? I think Gerald can definitely be a testament to this because he works in corrections. The addiction problem for First Nations is 3 to 6 times the severity is for non-Aboriginals. Mental illness is at least 2 times. Suicide across the country, it ranges from 6 to 12 times the national average. In Nunavut, 30% of the deaths are suicide. And for young Inuit men, it's 24 times the national average. This is probably the highest in the world. In some communities, they range across the country. Some, there's close to a 0 suicide rate. In other communities, it's 800 times the national average. How about foster care? Being one of my designations is a social worker. I have a master's in social work from UBC. And of course, from that, I know a fair amount about child welfare policy and procedures. Right now in this country, 2012, so that's a year and a bit ago, 30,000 children in care in this country. Guess how many are First Nations? 14,225. That's half. Our First Nations, there's some varying figures in the stats. First Nations, Aboriginal people is 3 to 4% of the general population of Canada. Guess how many are in our prisons? 25%. So 4%, First Nations 3 to 4% of the general population, 25% are in our prisons. Violence, in particular violence against women, is 4 times the national average. Right now there are 600 missing First Nations women in Canada. And what's the dropout rate for high school?
It's getting better.
It's getting better, just. But guess what it's still at? The last figures are from 2012. 51% of our young Aboriginal young people, excuse me when I say our, it's just what I do because I do so much work with First Nations. And the dropout rate, 51%. So, what's this doing? What's the impact? I'm going to use a couple of case examples. Of course, I'm not going to use their names, so I'll be using some pseudonyms. And I'll be overlapping that with some of the stuff we're going to talk about the brain and the mind and trauma. Okay, first of all, what is the brain? Anybody get any ideas?
It's our central system that helps us move forward in the world.
Our
Carries
central.
all of our thoughts and emotions and
Memories, good and bad, whether they're traumatic or not traumatic, from
fight or flight, freeze, helps us process experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Any other ideas? Just toss them out here. What is the brain?
Does it help us think? Helps us process stuff, information, right?
Yeah, it does. And there's a reason why I'm kind of wanting to really focus this, because I think it's really important. For me, it became really important to understand the brain. Like, what the heck is it? And what does it do? And why is that important for me to know all that? Because there's research that shows that our brain is pretty well its full size by the time we're 4 years of age. And there's other theories that by late adolescence, we've pretty well, filled it to the capacity in terms of its ability to process information. So if my brain, it's believed that my brain is the way it is by the time, I'm a teenager, that might give one a tendency to think, well, what's the point? What's the point of, getting help or going for therapy or going to treatment or going to my doctor and, maybe needing medication? So there can be a tendency of this kind of, what's the use, what's the point? And it's quite fatalistic. So by learning what the brain is and learning how it operates, how it works, can help me maybe have some intention to want to change it. So I'm going to make a distinction here, again, based on Dan Siegel's research, a distinction between the brain and the mind. They're two distinct things. They absolutely they're interweaved and interrelated, but the brain is itself a distinct thing. So is the brain this 3.5-pound chunk of flesh that's in my skull?
I say yes.
Say yes.
Yeah.
And that's true. That's how we mostly think, oh, that's my brain. You can even go to, labs and they'll even, hand you one and show it to you. There's a brain. That's what's in your skull. Well, the brain actually is much more than that. The brain is your whole extended peripheral nervous system, right down through your spinal cord and all the nerves and nerve fibers They'll go from the tip of your head to the tip of your toe and the tips of your fingers. So basically anything that's inside and including your skin is your brain. The brain is an embodied neurochemical system. Anybody ever think of it that way before?
No.
Yeah. It also includes your skeletal system. It also includes your muscular system. It also includes all those organs in your body, your heart, the whole gastrointestinal system. There's nerve fibers and millions of neurons throughout all those organs. It involves your endocrine system, all the hormones that flow through your body. The cardiovascular system. So your brain really is your entire body. The brain is an embodied organism. So here's the definition for what it's worth. The brain, the nervous system distributed throughout the entire body, which is the physical, structural mechanism through which energy and information flow. Holy cow. That's a mouthful. But this is what it's doing. The brain is moving energy and information. Any question? Is that clear?
Yeah.
Good. Dan Siegel uses a really good model, which is another reason I don't need much visual aids here today. He calls it the hand model of the brain. So if you hold up your hand like this, very good. Okay. This right here, kind of that meaty part of your palm in this area, in the lower part of the palm, and your wrist is kind of a representation of your spinal cord and the brain stem. Okay? So the brain, it's called the Triune Brain, which means three. There's three parts to it. Now take your thumb and fold your thumb over like this, and that's called the midbrain. Okay, so your thumb straight across like that. Brainstem, midbrain. Now fold your fingers over. That's the cortex, the neocortex, which is the outer layer, the outer bark of the brain. So there is a really handy representation of your brain. And I even use this when I'm working with children. They really get it. They can kind of look at it, feel it, sense it. This is my brain. So we're going to use this hand model as a reference point of how the brain works. Okay, so the brain stem, this part here, and the spinal cord is sometimes referred to as the reptilian brain or the lizard brain. People still hear me? Mm-hmm. Good. 300 million years ago, the dinosaurs, this is what they had for a brain, which is basically the function of this part was awake, asleep. The basic drives, eat, have sex, reproduce. So this is the rudimentary functioning area of the brain. It drives emotions, hunger, it regulates your body temperature, blood pressure, heart rate, all that stuff. Then this midbrain, which is called the limbic system. So bear with me, I know there's a lot of information, but it hopefully will come together by the time I'm through here. The limbic system, this is where emotion resides. Basic, fundamental emotions. When the dinosaurs became extinct and the water creatures started to come on to land, mammals arrived. And that's the mammalian brain. So this is probably 200 million years ago. And why are we called mammals? Well, that's about mammalia, is the infant drinks milk, the mother's milk. This is where we can attend to things, where we can focus. It's also where memory is stored. Oh, that's where that rabbit was that I ate a week ago. It's over there in that bush behind that tree. I remember that. The reptilian brain can't do that. This is where fear resides. This is where, in connection with this part of the brain, the lower brain, the brain stem, the flight, fight, freeze response resides. This is where it comes from. We get sensations from our sight, touch, smell that goes to this area of the brain, goes, that's a bear, a big grizzly bear. I gotta run. Flight, fight response. Very important, that response. It's key to what we're going to be talking about as we talk more about trauma. So there's memory, learning. This area is crucial for recording and processing those basic memories. Okay. Any questions about that? The limbic area, the limbic brain. Okay, then we're not sure, maybe 2 million years ago, the cortex, primates. This is the outer layer, the outer bark. Now when you bring that over, it's really important to notice this piece. So this part that I'm showing you is like you're looking straight on at a person's face. This is where the brain is. This cortex is where all the reasoning, planning, strategizing, so the more sophisticated, abstract processing that goes in the brain. Primates in particular, and of course, we are the most advanced and have the largest cerebral cortex. So if I have fear, and that flight-fight response coming from here when I see that grizzly bear, it's this neocortex that comes over and kind of gets control of that and helps it understand that, well, that grizzly bear is quite a ways away and it's eating some salmon right now, and it's not really that interested in you. So you have some time to kind of slowly walk around. So it kind of controls and regulates and manages those fear responses. Any questions so far about the brain? Any of this new or old, or you already know it? And good. So this is where I introduce one of my clients. I'm going to call him Donnie B. Donnie is about 53 years of age. He went to residential school. His mother and father went to residential school. His grandmother and his grandfather went to residential school. And there's a whole array of extended family in his community that went to residential school. Donnie was taken to residential school from his community at age 5. And the day he arrived, he couldn't speak a word of English. He beat up by an older boy. That was the day he arrived. And then through the next, I think he was there till he was 14. He had every form of abuse. Physical, of course mental, emotional, and sexual. When Donnie finally left residential school, within 6 months he was in the juvenile justice system. And that started a career of incarcerations. He could not make it a year out. He couldn't make it a year without getting back into prison. He had several children that are all adults. He had another relationship, so there's another group of children that are more in the elementary school age. And Donnie now, after almost an entire life of alcoholism, has been sober for 2 years. So when you think about this brain, this hand model of the brain, and trauma, and don't forget that Donnie's parents and grandparents went to residential school. So before he went to residential school, there was a lot of alcoholism in his home. There was a lot of violence. And there was a lot of that in the whole community. So what do we think happened to Donnie's brain when we think of these different areas? Well, the research shows that kind of trauma, severe, ongoing, over and over and over, repetitive trauma, impairs the development and the growth of the brain. Now, I don't have brain scans of Donnie's, but I do have a brain scan here of a child that, I think is a 3-year-old, that suffered extreme neglect and abuse. Are we able to see that?
Should I put that up?
Number 1.
She'll do content. We'll just take a few seconds here, and we'll get it up on Adobe Connect as well. Just hang on a sec. We're still working here, so if we could just, we're just coinciding.
Oh, are you?
Yeah. So there was a couple of comments, and while she's putting that up, it said somebody stated they loved the hand model. It's very helpful, and it was a nice visual to be able for you to do that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I found it very helpful. I mean, I'm not a biologist, and I'm not a doctor. I'm a social worker, psychotherapist. I am also a nurse. I'm a psych nurse, but for me to it really helped me to really get to understand the brain and how it operates.
Good.
There it is. So these are some brain scans that I accessed from Dan Siegel's resource. This is the brain, the one on the right, extreme neglect, is a brain from one of the Romanian orphans. I don't know if you've heard of the Romanian orphans, but these orphans were kind of left in these huge orphanages and deprived and neglected and starved and had no real, true human contact or nurturing. So there's a normal 3-year-old child's brain on the left. This is one of those Romanian orphans. And you can see what that has done, the impact. It's smaller, just in general size. And you look at the ventricles, which are the kind of gaps in the brain, and how much larger those gaps are in this brain. And the folds and everything in the brain are really deep, and you can have huge gaps in them. Okay, do we have another one?
Yep. Get down. There we go.
Okay, so this is an MRI, which is it's more distinct and explicit, and these red areas and the yellow areas are a fully developed, what we'd call a kind of a normal brain. And that brain on the right is a child that had extreme adverse childhood experiences, sexual abuse, physical abuse. You can see right there the difference in the two brains. It's just so dramatic. So studies show that from abuse and neglect, your brain will actually be 6% less in volume. The other main piece is it's reduced in all areas of the brain. In the limbic area, the thumb, and in the cortex. In fact, the new studies on sexual abuse alone indicate through MRIs and other brain scans that the cortex reduces in thickness by almost a half. So the cortex bark, the membrane at the top, is normally about 6 millimeters in thickness. If the child's suffered extreme sexual abuse, by the time they reach adulthood, it's half that size. And the other interesting piece for me was that the brain actually maps the body. So you have a map of all the body on the brain, and so when something happens to a certain part of the brain, it directly impacts that body that it represents, that body part that it represents. So with that knowledge, it helped me understand why Donnie, to this day, experiences pain in his genitals. And this is a common manifestation. Experiences pain in his anus. So to this day, being touched in those areas, the brain response is pain, when it's supposed to be pleasure. Donnie gets really scared or really angry when men come close to him or touch him. And I found that out in the first session or two working with him. That when I, pulled my chair closer, there was this immediate kind of recoil that he had, and his eyes got big. And one of the triggers for Donnie, there's many, but one of the significant triggers is the smell, what he calls lemon jam. And these are the triggers. So we're talking about triggers that are all about the senses. Smell, touch, taste, sight.
That would have been so interesting to hear us. You did. Should be able to do something.
I can hear somebody, which is good.
Is there a comment from one of the rooms?
Sorry, we were just reconnecting. I apologize for that. We're off now.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. So when Donnie smells lemon, he gets the same kind of flight-fight response. He gets really scared, anxious, and because of what was used when he was sexually abused, or the offender was using lemon of something. We don't know yet what it was, lemon marmalade or something is what I'm thinking, that was used in the sexual abuse acts. So Donnie's brain has been severely ruptured. I'm not talking about specifically brain damage, but all of it has been ruptured and damaged. And Donnie, when he gets triggered, he gets violent, which is why he spent a lot of time in jail, in and out of prison. He gets violent. So that's his brain. What happened to Donnie's mind? See, the mind is different. It's distinct. It's completely interrelated and connected, but the mind is different. It's not the mechanism. It's not that physical structure. The mind is the regulator. The mind regulates. It monitors and modifies and regulates all the information that's coming into it and all the energy that's coming in. And the research now shows that that part of the brain, which with the hand model again, is the cortex. And if you look at your two middle fingers, and in particular the two middle fingernails, what do you notice about them? What are they touching? What are they in contact with in this hand model of the brain? They're right on the brainstem, they're right on the limbic system, the flight-fight response, the emotions. So that's the control center. The prefrontal cortex, where your two fingernails, that's what keeps all of this intact and keeps it under control and manages it and regulates it. And you hear a lot now about people that, you know, have depression, anxiety, bipolar, PTSD. They can't regulate their emotions. We hear that all the time now. Well, it's because this area isn't working properly. It's been damaged, it's been ruptured, it's been impaired. And the synapses and all that. You know, the brain has 100 billion neurons. And each neuron, with all the dendrites and axons that come off of it, there's 10,000 connections from each neuron. So that's trillions and trillions and trillions of connections. And then each connection has an on-off firing switch. So they're estimating, and it's impossible to truly estimate it, that it's these on-off switches and connections in the brain, this is just the brain, not the whole system, is 10 times 10 times a million. And apparently that's more atoms than we have in the universe. So we have an infinite number of on-off firings in our brain. When I started this work, we were told once you damage the brain cells, that's it, it's permanent. You're never going to get them back. Well, the last 5 to 10 years with all the new research and neuroplasticity, no, we can create new neurons and new neural pathways. So what happened to Donnie's mind? Remember, it's that process that regulates energy and information. Donnie is impulsive. He does things without thinking. His decision making is really impaired. He makes very poor choices for himself and what he does in his life. He can't seem to control those basic drives.
Kevin, I'm going to ask your question right now because he is talking about that part of the brain. So question is, what's the connection between trauma impacts and mental illness?
Very good question, and it's coming up. So I will get to that. It's a good question. It's kind of coming in the next phase of this presentation. Thank you. So Donnie's mood is chaotic. He gets depressed. He's been suicidal many times. He's made many attempts. He gets enraged. He gets violent. Now, I'm describing Donnie before he got sober and before he started therapy and treatment. He went to residential treatment, then immediately came to me when he was got out of treatment, and he's been sober ever since. So the Donnie I'm talking about here is kind of pre-treatment. What are the emotions he feels the most?
I would say maybe fear.
His brain is operates almost exclusively from this area, which is the raw emotions. And yeah, you're right. And here's the fear. This is where the flight-fight response is. Well, now it's flight, fight, freeze, and faint. They've added a couple of other categories to that response. And sometimes fainting is a good defense mechanism. So it's because some animals don't like to eat something that they think is dead. So it's flight, fight, freeze, or faint. Most of Donnie's energy goes into wanting to avoid this, wanting to deny this, wanting to suppress this because this isn't working or wasn't working. It's working much better now. Why was Donnie not able to get and stay sober? So he's in constantly trying to push this down. His limbic system is always pushing up with these raw emotions, and the cortex is always pushing down to try to keep a lid on it, basically. So Donnie loses his lid quite a bit. His cerebral cortex just runs away on him. What happens to Donnie's relationships?
They don't last.
They don't last. His relationships are very brief and elusive, and he has a lot of difficulty maintaining relationships. And I'm going to tie this into attachment theory. What Donnie has is what is called insecure attachment. And in my work, I would say most, if not all, of First Nations I work with have attachment issues. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So yeah, for Donnie, the lower brain takes over. The lower brain is basically in charge.
Excuse me. Could you please have the screen switched back to the live format? We're still looking at the picture of the brain.
Oh. Yeah, how do we do that?
Hang on. Want to show the last one? There's 3. Or you're ready for that one?
Yeah, let's have a look at it.
There were
3.
Back to the screen.
Can I also ask a question as well?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Hello?
Okay, Catherine, maybe we should switch to the last one. So we're not going to go back to the slide. If they could,
Okay.
we'll go back to you speaking.
Let's just go back to me.
Yeah.
We kind of know what happens to the brain now.
Do I just ask a question?
Okay, question in the room?
Okay. Is it on now? Yeah. Okay, how do
Yes.
you repair or change that what you're speaking about?
Exactly.
Can it be repaired or changed?
Yes, it can. And this is the good news. Thank goodness the bad news is over now. We're going to shift to the good news. The good news is yes, it can. It absolutely can. So we're going to look at that. What needs to happen is that brain the rupture needs to repair. We need to repair the rupture, and we can. And the key here is relationships. Studies show that if I'm in a loving, caring, empathic, connected relationship, my brain will begin to heal itself. Brain cells, the neurons, and all the synapses, and all the firing, and all that activity begins to heal itself. And there's now research that clearly points to that. I don't have any brain scans to point to that, because the studies are still not, they're just kind of in process. There's a saying that those neurons that fire together wire together. So if I go to treatment and if I go to good therapy and I have a really nice connection with my therapist, if I feel this person, my counselor, this person that's working with me is really there with me and has an understanding of what I've been through, I'll never have a true, real understanding because I haven't experienced it. But you see, what we have, amazingly, is we have things in the brain that are called mirror neurons. So when I'm working with somebody, my brain starts to notice emotional change. So Gerald, if Gerald starts to express to me some hurt and pain, emotional hurt and pain, he starts to get in touch with some of that and feels free and open and trusting to share that with me. My brain will actually, the mirror neurons will actually take that and reflect it. So I'll start to feel, in a way, what he's feeling, because it's going to the exact same brain, the same neurons, the same brain cells in my brain as your brain. So there's this mirroring effect that happens. But the individual, it's important for the individual to feel that, to feel the trust, to feel the connection. Does that make sense?
Yes, we have a couple comments. Kevin.
Okay.
Kevin says love medicine. Love medicine. Like love is a medicine.
Yeah.
And Janet states that now we know why the quality of the therapeutic relationship is correlated with the most good outcomes for the client.
Absolutely. And what's amazing about it, and thank you for sharing that, because that is that's the critical piece to this whole thing. Because the brain did not receive, from all that trauma and the residential experience and the intergenerational, cross-generational effects, the brain has not been experiencing that.
Can I ask, are there any key people writing those studies about the brain and relationships and that you just mentioned? I'd love to read more about
There's
that.
so many. The source that I really go to, and in fact, that's where I got these brain images, was Dr. Bruce Perry, and he's from the Child Trauma Institute, and he's been at it a long time, 30 years, and he's a really good source, and he points you in the direction of all the other good resources.
Great, thank you.
It's really exciting because these are studies that are really coming to the forefront now with really good, rigorous research, and it's exciting for me.
Can we check if there's any comments or questions in the room?
Any more comments or questions before I move on? Good. The other piece that's really important in terms of intergenerational, cross-generational impacts, the parent, it's important for the parent to resolve their own trauma. Because I'm a parent, I have 3 sons, they're adults now. I will pass through mirror neurons and everything else that happens in that dynamic. I will pass that on to my children if I don't resolve it. And it keeps getting passed on. So now, we can really see for sure the impact of the intergenerational impact of residential school. Because it's been going on, what, is it 7 generations? Or 8 now? A lot. So we need the basic needs met first. The brain is an organ and it needs fuel. Our body needs fuel. So what do I put into it? Well, Donnie and myself, we put alcohol into it. I think it was mentioned, I come from a long line of alcoholics. My father was a severe alcoholic. My grandfather was killed at the age of 56. He was the town drunk. He was staggering down the road and got hit by a truck and was killed when I was 7 years old. There's 4 of us in our family. We're all fairly well educated professionals, and 3 of us are alcoholics. Even though me knowing what I know and doing this work for almost 40 years, well, it is 40 years now. I started in 1974. After a significant period of time of sobriety, I decided, maybe I can have a beer with the boys after hockey. Well, I don't have to get into all the details, but the end result of that, within a year, I had lost everything. I lost my home, my family, my practice, my license to do this work, and I ended up homeless and penniless in the downtown east side. And then subsequent year or so in some pretty horrific recovery homes. And I'll tell you, in the trouble with a lot of these recovery homes and certain treatment facilities is you're not going to get compassion, and you're not going to get understanding, and you're not going to get real care. What you're going to get is ridicule, shame, degradation, which is exactly what fuels the addiction. It's a key piece for me. I experienced that. I know what that feels like. Okay, so we need to feed our body, we need to have a good diet, we need to exercise. You know all this stuff, but a lot of us aren't practicing it. Mindfulness. I know it's kind of the thing that everybody's buzzing about now, this mindfulness meditation thing. But you know, when I finally sobered up, I've been a year sober, but I was still riddled with anxiety. I was still riddled with depression. My family wasn't talking to me still. And I still couldn't function. So I won 3 months to a Bikram yoga thing in White Rock. And I went. And I went every day. Okay, sometimes I went twice a day. Sometimes on my days off, because I finally was able to get a job back as a psychiatric nurse, I went 3 times a day. And within that 3 months, I knew my brain had changed. Something had altered in my brain. I knew that. The depression went away. The anxiety diminished. I stopped isolating and withdrawing. I reconnected with my sons. My oldest son didn't talk to me for 2 years because of the damage that my alcoholism did to the family. His way of dealing with it was to pretend I was dead. I was able to repair those relationships. I didn't repair them by crying about it or whining about it, or I did initially. Didn't work. I had to demonstrate to them that I was safe, that I could be trusted. So, with the yoga, with good exercise, with getting out and building and rebuilding relationships, I know my brain healed. I wish I had a brain scan when I was in my madness, and then what my brain is like today. I think we'd see some pretty dramatic stuff on an MRI. You ever listen to musicians before they're getting ready to do their show, and they start to tune their instruments from each other? And you can hear it, and then there's the harmonic, right, where they're right in tune. And they'll look at each other. I see it so many times. I watch for it now, and they'll look at each other and smile. So there's something happened there, right? They've got in tune with each other, and the term is attunement. And what we were talking earlier about is the connection with the therapist or whoever is working with you. That's 50% of therapy, is my connection with this person. That's 50% of the job done already. It's really, really important. I've had many styles over the years of how to do this work. And I'll tell you, in the early years, it was, get your you-know-what together. What's the matter with you? You've seen me 3 times. Get with it. Well, now when I hear that, it really pisses me off when I hear other people that work with people particularly First Nations people, why can't they get their you know what together? My limbic system fires up and I want to punch them.
Can you please say that again about the 50% of the job done?
Yep.
It cut out.
In this work, and probably in any balanced relationship that has compassion and has kindness and has caring and it's loving, if I'm conveying that to this person over here and he's able to feel that and experience that connection, 50% of his work is done in terms of his healing and his change. And the wonderful thing that I'm experiencing is that it changes me, as not only as a therapist, but just as a human being, as a man. There's this reciprocal thing that happens, this energy that moves. And now the studies show that my brain and Gerald's brain, they are social organs. They want to connect. They want to mingle and play with each other. And this is the energy that we get. That's called integration, not assimilation. There's a very big difference. For our First Nations know about assimilation. What did assimilation do? Right? Integration is very different. You know what the difference is? Integration is a fruit salad. Assimilation is a fruit smoothie. It's got the same stuff in it. But the smoothie, we can't distinguish the differences. So part of it is for me to honor the differences in Gerald. I'm honoring his differences. And that's why you'll find a lot of really good treatment programs, when people are in there together working on their issues and their trauma and their addictions, it becomes like that fruit salad. Everybody's different in their own way, but there's this amazing trust and bond thing that happens. So I'm giving Gerald the message clearly as best I can that I want to find out about him. I'm interested in him. I don't want to fix you. I really want to change you. All I need to do is demonstrate to you that I'm interested in you. I want you to share your experience with me. 50% of the work is done. I know that. I've experienced it personally. And I've experienced the opposite personally. I was in one recovery house, and the counselor in that recovery house, and I've let go of the bitterness and anger. Can't you tell? He said to me when I was feeling suicidal, he said, "Oh, wow, I'll drive you to Canadian Tire. I'll buy the rope. I'll drive you to Port Mann Bridge." These things are happening out there in a lot of these unlicensed, unregulated recovery homes. I did a talk on CBC last week. They interviewed me about it. I learned a lot. I learned more in that year about what it takes to be a helper than all my degrees. It's called empathy. Another word that's thrown around a lot, and I think quite haphazardly, and you gotta have empathy. Well, what the heck does that really mean? It's my job to get inside this person's mind and think how he thinks and feel what he's feeling. It's my job to be an advocate for your mind. How many times when we're sitting with somebody, I'm too busy in here thinking about what I'm going to say next or what my next move is going to be. It's like playing chess. I got to be 3 moves ahead of this guy. And when I'm doing that, my brain is not with you. Any more questions?
Yes, maybe we'll let you read this one from Susan. I get what she's saying.
Fruit salad smoothie.
Oh, no, sorry, Susan. Down.
Oh, yeah. If you break down attunement, it is at one-ment. Our ancestors recognized that everything has spirit/energy. Therefore, we can become attuned, as Yoda would say, the Force. Very good, Susan. Where is Susan? Can I see her in there?
No.
No? Oh, that's the webinar people. From this, in terms of the relationship piece, I believe is the key piece. I need to understand the brain. I need to understand the mind. But for me and the work I do, it's about relationship. Am I able to connect with this person? Am I able to connect with you? A lot of times most of the times I'm dealing, particularly with Indian residential school survivors, intergenerationals, I'm dealing with shame. And from shame, there's these statements, these beliefs going on inside of my brain that says I'm not worthy of connection. Because I'm flawed. I'm dirty. I'm stupid. Nobody loves you. So these are these core beliefs and statements that are running through me. The interesting thing is, I notice now, is what are the most popular shows on TV? Look, I'm not dissing anybody here about what is that one, the Ducks one?
Duck Dynasty?
Duck Dynasty. I'm not dissing it. I'm just saying. How much of humor and entertainment is about humiliation, ridicule, and making fun of? We laugh our faces off. African Americans get on and they ridicule their own people because it gets amazing laughs and they make amazing money. And that's okay. That's not what, I'm not here to criticize that. I'm just saying how much shame and ridicule has become a part of our culture. All cultures. So the shame piece destroys the connection. In fact, shame leads to disconnection. The thing with shame, we all have it to some degree. I had a lot of it. We all have it. We don't talk about it. And the less we talk about it, the more the shame. Now, I have a lot of people that come in and see me, and they don't want to talk about the trauma. They don't want to talk about the abuse. Why do I have to talk about this? It just brings it all up and makes me feel worse. I go see you, and I leave, and I feel worse. Why are we doing this? I don't want to do it. I hear that all the time, and I understand it. I have empathy for that. But you know what? The less we talk about it, the more we have it. So I need to work at being, courageous, I guess is the word, being vulnerable. Brene Brown, who's kind of the world expert now on shame, she studies shame. Can you imagine studying shame? She got a PhD on shame. She said the antidote for shame is vulnerability. I need to allow myself to become vulnerable. I need to feel safe enough in this relationship where I will become vulnerable. And this person is not going to ridicule me, and they're not going to hurt me. They're not going to do more damage. Our imperfection is actually what connects us. So when I'm sitting in a treatment center, I'm talking about my imperfections. And so there's this amazing thing that happens in terms of, some of the best friends I have now are guys I met downtown East Side and in the rat-infested recovery house I was in. I still have friendships with those individuals because we had this amazing connection. We're from two completely different worlds, but we're now kind of part of a fruit salad. I just got passed a note. Gerald, tell us about the cultural pieces. How this, what I've been talking about, fits with that.
So before we start, I'm Gerald. I wanted to just briefly introduce myself. I'm from the Lytton Indian Band. My traditional territory is the Untitled Nation. I work at Corrections Canada. I work with the Aboriginal, Inuit, and Métis offenders. For 5 years, I was at Mission Institution, and right now I'm on loan to New West Community Parole Office. For my job, basically, to put it in some words, I teach and facilitate culturally appropriate treatment programs that are designed to help the guys really think about their negative behaviors and whether or not they should be doing it. The one way I describe it when I share at the university is we use that Dr. Phil method. And what does Dr. Phil always say? How is that working out for you today? When you use drugs, what's the consequence of you engaging in that type of behavior? It's kind of the method that we use. In the institution, when the Aboriginal offenders are about to start their treatment program, we call that starting on their healing journey or their path to reintegration. And when I meet them, the guys, because I work with only the male offenders, male inmates, they're very cautious. They look at me and they don't know who I am, who the hell am I. They are very reserved. They don't want to talk to me. They won't open up right away. But I have something that helps me break those barriers, those obstacles, is by having the assistance of an Aboriginal elder when I meet with them. When I notice when the elder is with me, the guys, they're not so reserved, I'll put it. At the beginning, they tend to talk with the elder more, especially about their crime. And in some parts of our program, in the pre-program interview, we do ask them about their Aboriginal social history. And some questions do ask about residential school. And when I first work with the guys, I say to them, okay, these next questions are really probably going to be hard to talk about. You don't have to answer anything you don't want to. You just share with me and the elder what you want to talk about. And I say to them, you can look at me and say, I'm not going there. And I will leave it at that. So when that does happen, when one of the guys starts to, I'm not going there, I'll say, okay, we don't have to talk about that, but I want to share with you something. I don't blame you for not wanting to talk about residential school, because when my mom and dad went to St. George's in Lytton, they went through a lot of stuff when they were there. And when my mom went to the spirit world 10 years ago, she didn't deal with her residential school stuff. But my dad has. But this is about you today. I'm just saying, I know it's hard to talk about, past hurts and what you went through. And most of the time, when I say that to them, to the guys, they'll kind of tilt their head and they'll look at me, and then they'll start sharing just a little bit, not the whole story. And I'll say what you want to say to me, right? And Sometimes they cry. I went on a few trainings where when they begin to lament and cry about what they went through, I just let them shed some tears, and then once they're done, I'll ask the elder to hold a smudge ceremony or a talking or sharing circle, healing circle with them, and they're much better after that. So it takes a lot of work to work with the guys that are incarcerated and that have gone to residential school. I worked with some of the meanest men that, they've done some really horrible things, and for me to try to work with them, it's a challenge. But I've been doing it for 5 years now in the institution, and when I work with them, I say, the elder and I are here to help you. Okay, I don't have all the answers. Elder's going to take you through ceremony, and when you're in ceremony, this is another thing I share with them. 7 years ago, I went on my healing journey. I liked Corona, and it really took me to a bad place. And that's something I share with my guys, is because a lot of the times they say to me, well, you don't know what it's like to want to have a bottle or have a crack pipe, and I would just say, well, actually, I do. And part of when I went on my healing journey, I really had to get control of my Corona use. And then again, they kind of tilt their head, and because they don't see that about me when I work with them, they just see that I'm the CSC and this guy that went to university, and I'm the man. I work with corrections, and I'm going to tattle on them. But anyways, so that's one thing that I do, is I share personal experiences with them about my life. I don't share a lot. I share when it's appropriate, and when I do that, they're open to talking more about what they went through. Again, when I tell them that my mom and dad went to residential school, that really, the guard starts to come down. But it's a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. I liked this model that we looked at on the flip chart, is that I think when I work with them, I am building a relationship with these guys, and I don't judge them. I don't, because they're judged quite a bit within the institution, and I don't want to be, I'm trying to help them, and that's something I keep telling them, is I'm here to try to help you, and explore where is this, why are you getting so mad all the time? What's up, right? And in our treatment programs, we do talk about the 7 generations. The offenders are able to go to ceremony when they're taking programs, and when they're in ceremony, I really encourage them, the elder is here to help you with that hurt that you went through. And then they don't really get what I'm saying sometimes, so I say, 7 years ago, I said I was in a really bad place, and it wasn't until I went back to the sweat lodge ceremony that I started really looking in here, and I'm pointing to my heart, and dealing with this crap that I had going on in here and up here. I had a lot of negative ideas about myself. I was told I was dumb. I was told I was never going to leave the reserve. I was told by my native and non-native community that I wasn't going to amount to anything, and that really stuck up here. And sometimes it comes back, but I'm much more in control of those negative ideas about myself. But it took a lot of work, and that's what I share with my guys, is that I went and I dealt with this, and it's not easy, especially for men, because men don't like talking about their feelings, and that's a girl thing, and so I use the teachings that the elders say is, humble yourself and go into the sweat lodge and purge that negative stuff that is bugging you. That's what I did, and it really helped me. And I say to them, I would not be here working with you if I didn't follow what my elders were telling me, teaching me, and getting back into the ceremony. Okay, that's what our people. I remind them that's how our people were from the Lytton Nation. That's what we did long ago, and we thrived just like your nation did, all up in northern or wherever you're from. And then I keep reminding them of that. I believe ceremony does really work. It helped me so much, and when I speak to them that way, they start moving along and they start talking to me about where they were when they did that horrible crime to that person. And it's a lot of work, but I don't know what else to say.
If you could just touch on,
Yeah.
we spoke a little bit before the session,
Yep.
the work that you were doing to try and actually have a released offender or something.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the work that you had to do and
Yeah.
what happened.
So I was really hoping to invite one of the guys that I work with in the community. His mother and father were both forced to go to residential school, and they both left and started a family, and it wasn't a very good environment for the guy that I was going to bring with me today. I'll give you an example. One thing he shared with me was his dad would tie him to a chair and beat him with a broomstick and start reading the Bible to him while he was banging him on his face. And my guy that I'm working with, he's very, very, very angry. He can be very angry because of what happened to him. And because he was in a really toxic and home environment, the ministry took him away and placed him in foster care, and then he experienced a whole bunch of horrible abuses in that place. So his spirit was really hurt, and he's in the community now. I worked with him in the institution, and he would fly off the handle in an instant if things were not going his way or for whatever reason. And I would try. I was the only one that was working with him, because they were scared of him, and I would just try to do what I do and listen to him, give him things to think about in terms of what he's doing and how he's acting, remind him of his elders' teachings. And for me, when we talk like this in circle or one-to-one, that's healing as well. So that's how I worked with him. And then he left the institution, and you know what? I'm working with him again in New Westminster. So for me, the creator is telling me I have a little bit more work to do with him. But we were trying to bring him here, but unfortunately, due to paperwork, he wasn't able to join us. He's doing very well. He has a really great relationship with a young lady that he's met, who's really helping him deal with a lot of stuff. And he's still got some things to work on, but he's way better than he was before. And I really admire him for doing the work that he does for himself. So we're sorry he couldn't come.
Yes. I do have a couple comments on here that go back to the presentation. Vanessa stated she's going back to the making a comment about the integration. I believe it was your part of Mike's presentation, which is so interesting when talking about integration, because the word integrity stems from the Latin adjective integer, whole or complete. In this context, integrity is the inner sense of the wholeness deriving from qualities such as honesty and consistency of character. Kevin also has a comment, question. Outside of the therapist-client relationships, while important is the rest, mostly the parent-child, followed by peers, etc., essentially one's community. But given the intergenerational and cross-generational impacts of the Indian residential school abuse and other sources, it seems the challenge is to find love medicine apart from the therapy and in the community. Any thoughts on this particular challenge, especially the rural setting versus the urban one? Example, the downtown east side.
thinking more of the urban communities or the rural communities, I mean?
I think both, and I think he just used the example of the downtown east side, and probably because I think in community what we deal with, in my experience, is we deal with the effect in community of people returning home from the downtown east side. So a little bit of Vancouver comes into our communities as well, you know, because we deal with the after effect when either they come home, unfortunately in a box, or they come home when they're very ill or sick, or the support that's needed even when they remove the alcoholism and the drug addiction. So I think, you know, from personal experience dealing with those things when we're looking at supporting somebody even returning from in Vancouver or...
Here's, you know, from more of a community and systemic perspective than this so much, and it's still about relationship. I don't know, what's it now? Is $175,000 a year to keep one person in prison?
Pretty much that amount. It's very expensive.
And I know that it's at least that.
Women is higher. So
yeah, I mean, we're talking a lot of money. A lot of money. Why is that not going to the communities for early intervention? Working with the young families, working with the young mothers. You know, there's an experiment that I saw. It's called the still face, and it's a 6-year-old baby, and the mother is playing, and the baby's all excited and happy and cheerful, and it's wonderful. And then she does this control piece where she turns away, and she brings her face back, and it's completely blank. And the baby just tries first to get her excited and, you know, get her going again and get her interacting, and the mother holds the still face, and within 10, 20, 30 seconds, this child is crying and screaming and out of control, because that is a demonstration of a lack of attachment and bonding and what it does to a child. The funding needs to go into the communities. We don't build more prisons. I know we need prisons, but we need the money going into the communities and with the people and working with the young mothers and the babies. And programs for when the individuals come back from treatment into the community. Where do they end up when they go back into the community? I know, I was just in Haida Gwaii, and I know where they end up.
Can I just add something to what you said? I totally agree with what he's saying. Prior to leaving to the community from Mission Institution, had I stayed and facilitated one more treatment program, I get a list of who the guys that I'm about to work with, and I always try to read up on who's coming into programs with the elder and I. And one of my guys that I was about to work with, he was 17 years old, just about to turn 18. So I totally agree with what he's saying, is that we need to have more programs in our communities and strategize that way. So sorry to interject.
No, it's exactly, you know, it's just reinforcing.
Are there any thoughts, just based on your experience? I know that there's programs in your professionals, but not all communities have professionals.
No.
Can I say something?
Sure.
This is Doreen. I'm working with the Kiskanook Health Center right now, and my home community is Nisquameth Indian Band. I went through post-traumatic stress in 2010, and a lot of it was when my children reached the age that I had started to endure trauma in my life, and the beliefs, like you said, the beliefs that you have about yourself can snowball and change your perspective of who you are and how you feel about yourself. And so as I began on my journey, I was really had to go into self-awareness, and I really like to encourage that, you know, when you're working with people, ignore the, not ignore, but don't stay focused on the trauma itself. It's not the trauma that they need healing from. It's right back to childhood. So ask them, can you take me back to a place when something like this happened in your childhood, if we're not already talking about it, and then start focusing on what did you need then? Was it protection? Was it love? Was it affection? You know, And when you start focusing on that and trying to help them to understand or learn or find that for themselves, then they can change today and how they feel about themselves today. And part of it, another thing you bring up is energy. And when you were talking about the brain and how it at the bottom and then working your way up, that is the same as our chakra system. Our chakras, the root chakra is around the groin, and then there's the sacral chakra and so on and so forth. And your third eye is on your forehead. And lots of times we find ourselves doing that, putting our hand over our head. Well, there's a reason for that. We're activating that chakra on our head.
Prefrontal cortex.
And so I learned that we're all made up of energy. Every living cell in our body is energy. Therefore, we have the power to affect the things around us. It is with understanding of the yin and the yang that we can understand positive and negative energy, and that each of those energies vibrate at different frequencies and how it attracts other positive and negative energy. So if we have all of these negative thoughts or beliefs, it comes from the beliefs, not just the thoughts. The beliefs are stronger than the thoughts. So when we have those negative thoughts about ourselves and our life, we will attract more negative energy, and we will lower our vibration. So when we're in a lower vibration, we subject ourselves to harm and to things that we wouldn't normally do to ourselves if we felt love for ourselves. So when we move into more positive thinking or beliefs about ourselves, we attract more positive into our life and we raise our vibration. So to feel love for oneself is done by understanding that, we all need love, and we can provide ourselves with love. And that's where it has to start, is with us.
That's right.
And
thank you, Doreen. Is it Doreen?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you. Can I just speak to that just for a second?
Yes.
Okay. You're right. We do need to move from the trauma and don't stay obsessed and fixed on that. I agree with that. Our brains are designed and our minds are designed through relationship, and we need to tell our story. It's so important. We need to express our narrative. That's part of resolving the trauma. And so the goal is to get to that first, get to the truth, get to your truth, your reality about that, speak it, tell your story, and there's healing that happens just from that. But when we're talking about all of our attachment issues with our mother in particular and the others in our community that take on those caregiver parent roles, we need to have what Bruce Perry calls the 4 S's. Have you heard of it? The 4 S's. First of all, we need to be seen. So as little children, we need to know that somebody's watching out for me, that I can be seen. I can glance around and there's somebody there. I need to feel safe. So in my relationship with my caregiver or caregivers, I need to feel that I'm safe and I'm protected. If I'm in an environment where there's a lot of alcohol and a lot of violence and a lot of that chaos and mayhem, I am not going to feel safe. And how can I possibly be seen? The third S is I need to be soothed. There's so much research on soothing now and the importance of that. And First Nations culture, they got that a long time ago. I carry my baby, my child around with me all the time. I'll breastfeed till they're 5 or 6 years of age. That's just how we were designed originally. So it's really important for that soothing to occur in those very early developmental years. So from those, feeling seen, being safe, being soothed, I'll feel secure. And that's why it's important to go back to working through and resolving those trauma issues, and then moving forward and teaching the next generations, because now I've resolved it, I can teach the next generations what it means to be a mother and a caregiver. When we were hunters and gatherers, the family, do you realize that, I don't know how they measure this, but apparently we used interaction and language and commune all the time, 24/7. It was part of being in the family, being in the community. The longhouse, the pits. And so the language was being used 24 times as much as it is today. We were in constant interaction and communion with our family and our extended family and the community. We don't have that anymore. Where are my children getting their interaction now? TV, Facebook, and on it goes. The piece that's missing is this live human to live human. Anyway, I tend to go on, and I apologize for that.
No, I think in some ways Doreen answered it, and I was just thinking about the path, because many of our communities don't have, there's improper treatment centers, or there's treatment centers far away, or the program, once they get back into community, and then, so I guess the question is, what kinds of things can communities do to support people returning to community? And some of it might lie in what Doreen is talking about, but have you seen successful practices in communities where people are supported when they attempt to reintegrate back into community?
There are a few, the communities I've been in the last few years, particularly working with the residential school healing program, there are a few select communities, and it's all about resources and funding and where that's going.
Isn't it?
And people really,
it's all about money still.
tends to be.
Okay.
It's serious. It really is. That's the reality of it.
Right in the midst of this presentation, actually, I received an email from Namgis offering exactly what you're talking about. They've developed a community family model that assists with exactly part of this presentation. They've actually offered to come on to the UBC Learning Circle to share their best practices and what that looks like, what that model development, probably the pre-planning and the actual planning and the integration into the community. So thank you, Namgis, for Community Health Center for that offer. So we'll be speaking with them. They offered a follow-up session. They haven't did a presentation before that she said, but she's willing to share that model. So I'm glad you asked that question, because that was going to be a closing comment as well. So that's what the UBC Learning Circle is about too, is sharing those best practices, sharing your wisdom, sharing your knowledge. And a piece of that is, back in the beginning of the presentation, Mike, you were talking about the oral tradition pieces, and we saw that with the youth a couple of last week, actually, that the youth need those oral traditions, and hearing those stories, connecting them back to where they came from. It was amazing, because this young man, he's, I don't know, 5 years younger than me, but hearing the stories that were a part of my family for the first time. So you can imagine that the oral traditions become a part of it, and the amount of research that he's done. The cultural pieces, all our presenters, Gerald, we've presented together at Simon Fraser together, and what I heard echoed in almost every single youth that has come on here to present their success in university or college, the challenge was finding a community that would be accepting of them. The cultural pieces, and some of the young ones as young as 14 leaving their communities and succeeding here in the city, that she talked about finding her culture. What did her culture look like? Accepting and modifying what she was learning, and learning to accept that, yes, this is a large city. But she talked about reconnecting with that, and it's strengthening her. So, our culture and our language and everything is there. It's just a matter of bringing that forward and feeling that love that you're talking about. There's comments happening here on the chat that talks about, when we talk about imperfections, I often ask, who did you learn these problems from? The problem is, as Yoda would say, you must unlearn what you have learned. Thank you for that, Susan. Ruby states, one day our elders asked, what is it that we lost? It is that which we need to reclaim. And then Susan, following up on Kevin's comment, I think that we have to rebuild our cultures. The answer is in our culture. What is missing is not lost. There is a collective wisdom. The problem isn't just an individual issue, it is a community issue.
That's right.
Look at the strengths our people have, and we are still here. And I will be posting, we will ensure both your bios are posted. There was request for your bios of the presenters. So just a couple more comments going on here. Early childhood development theory and practice is crucial in a community healing process. For instance, I read that the traumatized male feeding an infant is a strong antidote for their own attachment issues. Similarly, there's an important program, Child Who Witnessed Abuse, which helps the child find and express their emotions that manifest when seeing parental violence, and so on.
Yeah, when I have 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds coming in to see me, and I do see them, they range from age 2, 3 to up to 93, I think now. And their art, the drawings that they do, when I ask them to draw their mom or their dad or their family, and it's heartbreaking sometimes, what I see and what I know is going on for them in their world. When I see pictures of blood splattering everywhere, and I'll add, oh, what is all that red stuff? And then, oh, that's, my mummy's blood. I mean, that's heartbreaking to me.
We're not going there then.
Oh.
So what I guess I wanted to say about today's session too is, a lot of partnerships have occurred with the UBC Learning Circle, and this circle today stemmed from the partnership with the Indian Residential School Survivor Society and Maxine Windsor, and the elder support that she's been giving to the UBC Learning Circle, and her ideas that stem from Truth and Reconciliation Week back in September. So hosting a series of different workshops, events that needed to be brought to the UBC Learning Circle. So this was, I believe, the 5th in a series of 5, because she just kept putting back on the table when we were meeting as a group at that time with Health Canada. There's a large group that we're forgetting here. It's the incarcerated, the trauma, the, we don't want to forget them. They come back to our communities. What does that look like? And it was a lot of direction from Maxine and the support that she offered to the UBC Learning Circle and the guidance. So I kind of wanted to recognize those partnerships that we have with, at that time, Health Canada, now the First Nations Health Authority, and, our connection to Carol Patrick, and, linking Mike and I up, and then my relationship with Gerald, and knowing and hearing that his experience with Corrections Canada. And I appreciate both of you and the hard work that you continue to do. And I'm not sure if there's any more. I want to give opportunity to the video conference for any comments, questions. And it looks like we do have a series emerging from this series, which is good. It will take us in a different direction, which is fine. That's what we like to do here at the UBC Learning Circle, is meet your needs in the community. And this tells me this is needed in community. There is a lot of participants who listened today and came to listen in person and on Adobe Connect. So is there any comments up there on video conference? If not, I'd like to allow you two to close if there's any closing comments you might have.
Hello? Hi, I got a question.
A question?
Okay, yes.
Safe right now.
Okay, yes.
How would you suggest that we encourage the survivors to speak out in your community?
It is about safety. It is mostly about safety. And when I do go to communities, I just started going to Haida Gwa. I've been there 3 times now. I go once a month. It's again about building relationship and trust and people feeling safe and secure. So we need people that are able to do that, to go into the communities and develop those relationships. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's basically how I can sum it up. To me, everything's about relationship.
Okay, thank you. But then how would you say there is a lot in your community that haven't dealt with it and they have, they've now passed on. How would you suggest that the younger generation, the ones that are still dealing with the effect of it, how do you suggest they deal with that?
I think it has to be one piece of a whole bunch of different pieces. And doing the cultural work and doing the traditional work and the singing and the drumming and all of that, it has to be done in that context. And then there has to be a safe place within that where people have a place to start to tell their story. They need to get the message within that context, the cultural and traditional context, that it's safe for me to tell my story. It's safe for me to be vulnerable.
Okay,
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could just get you to mute your mic. We just have a couple of quick questions. I think quick questions on here. The question was, I must have missed it somewhere in the stream. Sorry, Brenda. But the question was, how do we encourage survivors to speak about their experiences? And how do you encourage survivors to get help? What can you say to them? And yes, those are the kind of all tied in together.
My experience, again, is to go into the community or be invited, because I always feel that I'm a guest and I've been invited to whichever nation's territory it is. And it's important for me to get that and understand that I am a guest and it's an honor. And once the elder knows all this. That's been my experience. Once they feel that, sense that they're respected and honored, that will start to open the door. And that means sitting in ceremonies, sitting at gatherings, sitting, enjoying the food. Haida Gwaii had some amazing halibut. So much halibut, I don't know if I can ever eat it again, but it was just about that. It really does come from that basic foundation and framework of culture and tradition and community. It starts there.
Sorry, Gerald, let's go back to your closing comments.
Well, I just want to say thanks to Crystal for inviting me. Thank you for everyone for joining us up north, wherever you are. I've appreciated sharing my role for today, and thank you. I learned a lot. I really did enjoy your presentation.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Thank you.
Yes.
And thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you. Some of your communities I know about, and I've been there before, and it's an honor to be able to do this with you today.
I say Heitzka for everybody's presentation, and I will at this time say we always appreciate any feedback. We did have some feedback sent to us during this presentation midstream. Positive, constructive criticism, we're open to that. We're open to, as well, any future presentations or presenters or best practices in your community. We welcome those types of ideas, and we work hard to bring those back to you here at the UBC Learning Circle. You can send us an email. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Some upcoming learning circles include, we have a session on the 23rd. I believe it's our 4th in a series of health and nutrition, feeding your family's delicious food with Jerry Caston. It's a live presentation. It was quite successful the last stream that we ran, the last series we ran, very lively, very in-person. So we will be heading out to the university in a kitchen there on Thursday. Nankaini Wellness Center Society, I believe we have Willie Alphonse going to talk to us about treatment center and the facility work and challenges, successes, programming, just different things of that nature. February 6th, we have Mental Health and Nutrition with Rebecca Savity and the First Nations Health Authority. February 11th, we have the BC Aboriginal Network on Disability Society Health Resources and Support in Disability. They actually approached us and asked us if they could do a UBC Learning Circle. So this is what I'm talking about. People approaching us. We're quite open to helping, have our input on the presentation and give you feedback prior to presentation. There's a lot of background work that happens to come to the circle. February 13th, we have the physical, I believe it will be the Physical Activity Council in Healthy Families BC. It was just exciting. At the end of last week, I also secured Grand Chief Doug Kelly to speak in conjunction with why we should get active in our community. So that is out there. February 20th, we have Aboriginal Women in Law, a partnership with Simon Fraser University First Nations Student Association. That's an evening session from 7 to 9. March 11th, Making Sense of Lateral Violence. This is what I was talking about during Gathering Wisdom. The amount of people stopping at our circle booth, they didn't have time to do the survey, but it became apparent that, they wanted the lateral violence bullying piece to be addressed. Whatever that looked like, turned to one of the leaders in the province that everything just pointed back to her. She's done a presentation on the UBC Learning Circle before. We'll be joined by Denise Finley. In addition to that, March 13th, we have Early Childhood Nutrition with Jerry Caston and the FNHA. March 27th, we're doing traditional foods. This time it will happen on with our connection to Penticton Indian Band. April 10th, we have Healthy Eating for Wellness and Chronic Disease Prevention and Management with Rebecca Savadi, FNHA. April 15th, The Roots of Bullying, a second in a series that we're dealing with that lateral violence piece, how the bully is created and understanding those pieces. So again, we welcome any feedback. Email myself or Catherine, and we look forward to seeing you Thursday or at a future session here in the near future. Thank you for participating and staying with us, and everybody take care, and Haichka.
Hawa.
Take care, everybody.